people are just coming along, doing what we're doing. So I encourage everybody again, Dominic here, who's our site supervisor, Katie, Becky, Michael in the room here, please chat with them, and myself certainly. Any questions you might have. We're going to have some more people coming in here, larger community, but I want to give you guys now a few minutes to ask me any questions that that you might have.
I'm new to the community. I mean, my family's born and raised here, so it's been my second family in our life. But I just moved here, and it's hard for me just to find housing. My son's living with with my mother, right? Because of the problem. We bring that many more people into the community. I mean, I love the idea. I think the whole thing is so wonderful. Yeah. What do you see as maybe part of that approach?
So the city actually has some very interesting plans. We have gone over those before. We went over them again today. We want to be able to help where we can in that regard. I don't want to get into the real estate development business. That's not my business. It's not what I know. But,
I have connections in real estate.
Okay. The great thing, it's actually been very interesting with the conversations because there's a lot of cool stuff going on here. We think what we're doing is cool, but there's a lot of other stuff that's going on. And I think that, with some of the things that the city is working on, there are plans for housing, and then certainly with the draw, you hope that you create a positive feedback loop in there, and you have the additional development.
I'd like to visit with you maybe on the side. I work with County Resources Initiative, and I think that there may be possible funding out there to bring some sort of housing to the community. So I'd love to have that conversation with you.
Thank you, Michael. I'm not supposed to say city, it's town. Sorry. All right. Yes.
Help me as a skeptic.
Yep.
But you're looking at so much input for so much output.
Correct.
And how you do the math in between is up to you guys and the engineers.
Correct.
But you don't have a contract with the Forest Service. Is there enough biomass in private land to be able to run this thing until you get something with the Forest Service? And is there going to be a contract with the Forest Service in the future?
The U.S. Forest Service?
Yes.
I don't know. I honestly don't have an answer for that question.
So how do you know you're going to have enough biomass to run this plant?
So we've done a feedstock study. We have contracts with a couple, I'm not going to say who they are because you'll know them, but at the moment. We have contracts with a couple of suppliers that we feel comfortable, they're termed contracts over a period of time, to supply at our startup levels. We are continuing to work at the accelerated level. So for those of you who know the facility out there, they originally designed the facility to do 8,000 wet tons, 850 dry tons a day of biomass processing. The facility, the actual wood handling system out there can only do half of that. There needs to be some enhancements. The geometry works, but there needs to be some equipment. So we have contracts in place to be able to start at the 450 level. We continue to work on the higher level. So if we stay at the lower level, the math still works. The numbers are just a little smaller. We want to get to the higher level. Now, I'm kind of a political animal. We're very active politically, both in Salem and in DC. We're going to continue to push it. You and I were chatting. It only makes logical sense to do this, to get that wood, to get the slash out of the federal lands. The private lands are far better managed than the federal lands are. The fire doesn't stop at the fence. You got to keep going. So.
But Chris, just explain for the folks that don't understand why it can't come off the federal land right now.
Right. Yeah. So and actually, thank you, Katie. It could come off the federal land. It's just a question of what do we get paid. So if you pull wood off the federal land, you're not eligible for any federal credits. You can't get the RINs. You can't get the hydrogen credit. You can get paid the Oregon CFP or the California LCFS. You can get paid the molecule value for the methane. But without the hydrogen credit in the RIN, the math becomes very challenged in terms of working. Matter of fact, it doesn't. And so you need to get that full package of credits to make it work at the higher level. It works at the lower level, but it doesn't really work at the higher level. So we want to be able to get all of those. Now, could we augment for volume some of the federal wood and just not get paid for the credits? Yeah, I mean, given where natural gas prices are and some other things, you could take a look at it and see. Yeah.
So, are the chips from the mill eligible for reuse?
Great question. So, again, we come back to the credits. For eligibility for federal credits, and actually this applies to the state credits too, you've got this concept of traceability, okay? So just as an example, when somebody makes biofuel out of used cooking oil, the EPA requires that the person or the company that makes that fuel is able to trace that grease back to the McDonald's it came from, okay? Seriously, it's crazy. It's bad enough here in the US. You start buying this stuff from Korea or China, forget it. I mean, it's almost impossible. So what they've done is they've taken that same methodology and they've put it onto the cellulosic biomass. And so if you're using corn stalks, you got to know what field of corn it came from. If you're using wood, you've got to be able to geolocate where it came from so that they can prove that A, it's not federal, B, it's sustainably grown, and C, best practices are being. So, in direct answer to your question, a big old bucket of wood chips, not going to work.
Well, they have a lot of private timber come in there and a lot of government timber come in there.
Right.
You can tell the difference.
Well, what you got to do is you got to segment it on the front end. You basically got to say, this set over here is coming from certified property. This set over here is coming from federal. So this isn't going to work. Chips, I actually can see a path to where you could make that work. Dimensional lumber scraps, you're never going to be able to do it. Mill waste, going to be very, very tough to be able to use that. Now, one of the things we are involved in right now is a project that's coming together up at OSU in the forestry department to really to study this. Academics love to study, but in this case I think it could be valuable to figure out what is the communication protocol, what is the messaging, how do we let people know that there's now value in this. You don't just got to dump diesel on it. You can actually get paid for this material if you get it out of the woods and you follow these certification protocols. That's the holy grail, if you will, to show that there is value. We will pay a whole lot more, we'll pay significantly more than hog fuel to be able to get that material out and turn it into fuel. Yep.
So there was a lot of agreements in place with Red Rock, community service agreements, different things. Are you guys going to honor that community service agreement? Are you renegotiating that with the town and the county?
So we're not looking to renegotiate anything. We have inherited some of the agreements that Red Rock had. Like we have explicitly accepted the bond deal that was done with Business Oregon. There's other things that frankly we're trying to get our head around right now. That we had a meeting, 4-hour, 5-hour meeting today with the city and the county, just trying to figure out exactly what's there. So I'm not sure specifically what you're talking about on the community services agreements.
So it comes down to taxation. The 15-year community service agreement was 15 years of taxation at a different rate.
Yes.
For different things. I wondered if you're going to honor that 15 years.
We absolutely are. Yeah, that's an agreement that conveyed with the physical site. And so we are. I will say this, and I'm just going to reference our project up in Columbia County. So what we're doing up there and what we want to try and do down here as well with your help, quite frankly, we've gone significantly beyond that. We understand that doing the type of projects that we're doing in these type of communities is kind of like throwing a bowling ball in a bathtub. I mean, it's a good thing to the point about housing, but it can be disruptive. And so what can we do to help along the way? And so right now, talking about up north, we're doing, it's small stuff that we're building on. Things like working with all of the schools on after-school enrichment programs and the fact that, you know, we have kind of cutting-edge things that we're doing. And in fact, up there, we're doing a very, very large wetlands mitigation site. Can we have the kids in the school help grow the plants, help, you know, get into STEM or STEAM, I heard, I guess is the new word today, programs that we can help support in these communities? Can we look at organizations in the communities that we can help support financially, and then also with, you know, some of our people's time and everything else to kind of, you know, I hate the term give back. What we're trying to do is actually pay for the support that we get for, you know, for everybody, everything else that are coming in. We absolutely intend to honor those agreements that they entered into. That agreement, the one you're talking about, we have a very good understanding of, and yes, that one, no problem. There's a couple of other agreements out there we're still kind of scratching our head on, just trying to understand. We don't have an opinion on them, we're just trying to still understand them. But that specific agreement you're talking about, yes, that is conveyed across, and we intend on that. Okay.
I have a couple of questions. One, I'm not really certain at all of the process of what you're going in. How will we be able to, do you make enough product out of it to offset the cost of the energy that's going in? And since you already mentioned that it's basically you need credits or some other form of subsidy, generally from the government in one form or another, would this project stand alone, or do we get to look at it as being a possible tent nail to the community?
So, none of these advanced biofuel projects will stand alone without the credits. The input cost outweigh the output revenue. That's a general rule. If you assume that the credit environment, both federal and state, is going to go away, then you should never invest in these projects. That's just the truism right now. In states like Oregon and in particular, but really nationwide right now, the state credits I think are pretty solid. These states, all of these states on the West Coast and DC are fairly progressive and supportive of these credits. The key pieces that are driving things like the RINs, the Federal Renewable Fuel Standard, actually has nothing to do about, you know, touchy-feely green stuff. It has to do with Midwest farmers selling corn for ethanol. And that political lobby's not going anywhere. And so the RFS is going to stay in place. So that set of credits are pretty solid. When you look at the politics behind the IRA, and particularly the politics relating to hydrogen, carbon capture, et cetera, interesting little nuance there. The people supporting those more than anybody else are actually my home state senators in Texas and people like them, because the Gulf Coast produces more hydrogen and captures more carbon than anybody else. And so there is a political element to this. There's no question. It's one of the reasons we're so active politically and others like us. I think we're safe for the foreseeable investment horizon. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to attract the capital that's coming in.
You're not familiar that there's a mass movement of trying to have this part of the state go to Idaho. How will that affect you?
Well, if this part of the state, I think Congress would have something to say about that. But if the state were to go to Idaho, then you'd probably lose the LCFS credits. You'd still have the federal credits that would be coming in. And the hydrogen credit is the big one, and I don't see that one going away. If they did, then it would be very difficult to make money on this project, because the molecule value of the gas by itself is not sufficient to cover. It actually cover your input cost. What it wouldn't cover is the amortization of your capex.
The $500 million you're spending to create the fund.
Yeah, correct. Yep.
Perhaps I missed it earlier, but there was some rumors going around earlier that there were, you could not use juniper. Is that correct?
So the Red Rock system, because it operated at a lower temperature, had a real problem with the resins and all of the, you know, the stuff that's in the juniper. And so they actually could use it. They just had to specifically tune the system. So you had to have like a juniper day, if you will, where you're just burning juniper. We're burning so hot that it'll eat just about anything. What we have to be careful with is moisture content. You've got to be sure that the wood is dry to a certain level, because what happens with these systems are, if you remember your basic chemistry, when you turn something from a solid to a gas, you liberate energy. And so that energy, and techie terms, it's a very exothermic system. It generates a lot of heat. And so once you get the thing up and running, it basically runs on its own heat. You put moisture in there, you stall the whole reaction. And so that's the big issue. You've got to make sure that what's going into the top of the machine is very dry. You know, no more than 15% moisture content.
How do you dry your roughage?
We have dryers. There's dryers in the process that come across. It has to go, it's a continuous flow process, and you've got dwell time in the dryers to make sure that you're keeping your moisture level in balance.
You mentioned it's high heat, is that electricity that would be doing the drying process?
Anything else?
Do you have an estimate of like noise pollution when you're running 24/7?
We don't. And I could throw some stuff out at you, but we're actually going to be doing a noise study. We got to figure out the exact configuration that we're going to have in terms of grinders and whatnot. I don't know, did they, because it's going to be very similar. Do you know if there was a noise study put in place? Okay. So we'll end up doing one just to take a look at what we think it's going to be. I don't have a specific number. We don't have, it's not like we have a big hammer mill or something there. I mean, it's a continuous process of grinding and then just general plant noise, if you will.
Are you running 24/7 though?
We will be running 24/7. 24/7, 340 days. We'll have about, 20, 25 days spread out across the year of turnaround, where we have to go out and just do PM on the equipment and everything.
Yeah, a few of us came in a little late, apparently, but can you maybe recap just a little bit about when we're going to see things start happening there?
Sure. For about the next 90 days, there's going to be some activity on site, but it's primarily going to be moving old equipment out. We're going to be doing engineering kind of in the background. Once the equipment gets out, we'll get our engineers on site. We're hoping to be able to finish our new engineering by early next year. Start construction sometime in Q1. Hopefully finish off with the plant by, certainly by the end of 25, hopefully by Q3 of 25. That's the general timeline.
Did I hear you say that it's an additional 500 million in capital?
That's correct. Yep.
How confident are you in the lending?
Pretty confident, actually. This is a project, so there's two different buckets. This is what I spend 28 hours a day working on and stare at the ceiling at 2 in the morning thinking through what happens. There's two real buckets of capital here. First is the commercial market. The term loan market, the commercial credit market is actually available here. The numbers work, the ratios work, the coverages work. It's expensive money, but it's available. The other side that's becoming more and more prevalent today, so as part of the IRA, when that got done, one of the things they recognized was, hey, there's got to be the capital here to do this. And so the DOE's, Department of Energy's Loan Program Office, LPO, a guy named Jigar Shah runs, they're out in the market. They have $177 billion that they're deploying right now for projects in the renewable energy space, specifically focused on biofuels. This project, which we've already met with the DOE on, is literally a slow pitch down the middle for them because it's cutting edge, it's waste energy, and it's in a community that, quite frankly, ticks all the boxes in terms of needing this type of development and everything else. So we're pursuing both of those paths. They're both valid. They'll both work. The commercial path is quicker. The LPO path is basically what they're doing is they're guaranteeing the whole debt package. And that is much cheaper money. So we're going to see where we get to, where we are in the engineering process as these two both come to fruition, and then we'll make the call as to which way we go. Yep.
I got 4 or 5 questions.
Sure.
How much of the financing are you going to the high yield market for? Are you going to the bond market?
No.
Have you hired an underwriter, or are you hiring investment bankers to do the facilitation? Is your business model based on carbon credits being financially profitable? And last but not least, how tied are you to the federal government in order to be able to do that, just like Tesla?
Yeah. So, we're not Tesla, but we do spend a lot of time in front of the electeds. We're very tied in with the Corps because we're doing a big Corps EIS up north. But we're very active in DC. I don't want to represent that I can move the needle politically with the White House. We certainly have people's ear. There's a lot of other folks that are with us doing similar things that are definitely pushing in that direction. I think we'll at least know if the train's coming around the corner, policy-wise, and we need to try and weigh in on something.
Who's helping you in the state of Oregon facilitate that representation in DC?
So actually in Oregon, we use a group called Thorn Run Partners. They're our lobbyists. Katie Kearns here is very well connected in DC. We have our own set of lobbyists in DC. These are actually, it's a group from Texas that I use because we don't just focus on the Oregon delegation. We have the Texas delegation and others that we work with. In Oregon, up in our project up north, we have very significant labor participation. We're actually the first large industrial project in energy to get unanimous up north, the project up north, AFL-CIO endorsement.
Are you aligned with any of our local House or Senate representatives?
Yeah, so I've spoken multiple times with Senator Finley. I've spoken quite a few times with Rep. Owens. I was at an event last night with Governor Kotek. I spoke for an hour and a half with Tobias Reed last Thursday. So I don't want to say that we can tell them, hey, X, you need to go do this. I don't have that kind of stroke. But we are in conversations with these folks, and they are very supportive of what's going on. To some of your earlier questions. So we have, I hate to think about it, given the amount of money we spend with these guys, but so we have kind of the who's who. Goldman Sachs are our primary bankers. Citigroup is actually doing the financing here for this, both principally as well as bankers. On the equity side, we have as investors large Japanese trading firms as well as United Airlines on the project up north, Shell Oil, etc. So on the equity side, it's primarily our own firm as well as strategics. And then on the debt piece, it's syndicated debt.
So you already have a pipeline of syndicate customers that you're working with in order to be able to raise the $500 million?
Correct. Yeah, we're deep into the. I wouldn't come into the deal if I didn't think I could get out of
And
it.
if you had to handicap it on 1 to 10, how successful are you at this stage? Are you a 6? 7.
I give it a 7, and the only reason I give it a 7 is because of externalities in the market I can't control. If we go into a pit of hell recession, there's nothing I can do about it. The bond market, the debt markets. We're not doing public bonds, by the way. The debt market shut down. So.
A couple of words were used that kind of triggered me to ask these questions. Sure. They're more specific maybe, but pipeline was mentioned. Has the pipeline, the gas line from Ruby to Lakeview been installed already? I don't know if that was done by Ruby or by Red Rock.
It's there. It's never flowed. But
right, I know it hadn't, but I didn't know it was there. The other was, you said something about the train coming around the corner. So is there any incentive, any place in the old Red Rock project? This project was important to the railroad in the county. Is there any place, any role to play for our railroad there? And maybe bringing materials in from further out, or what's the deal?
That's a great question. So we are not planning to use the railroad to export product, clearly. We're putting it into the pipeline. However, we see 2 specific areas where the railroad could be very useful for us. One of them is exactly in the biomass. To be able to look at going further afield and establishing aggregation sites, for lack of a better word, where you can bring it in, get it into rail cars and bring it potentially from eastern Oregon or some places up north. I don't know what the net back logistics on that are, the net back cost on those logistics are. We are looking at it though, and figuring out where might be some areas, because the more time you handle the material, the more expensive it gets, clearly. The other thing we're looking at right now, and this is still speculative, and I can't get into a lot of detail because some of this is confidential. So, as I mentioned, we're going to make hydrogen, we're going to make CO2. we're gonna take the hydrogen and a portion of the CO2, we're gonna combine it and make methane. We're gonna take H2 and CO2 and turn it into CH4 and oxygen. So we're gonna have some CO2 left. Now that CO2 is, again, what we call biogenic. It doesn't count against you because it came from the wood. But if you could capture it and sequester it, then you get a lot of value, because now you are what's called a carbon sink. You're burying the carbon. And so you're taking carbon out of the equation, and the regulators love that. So there's a possibility that we could capture the balance of that CO2. We're working on another project with carbon sequestration, which I won't get into the details on, but we could potentially rail the CO2. Now, again, it's going to be a question of the economics there. And what is it going to take to get it into the cars, move it, a couple hundred miles, and then inject it in. But it is something we look at. And, what ends up happening, the way you do that economic analysis is you look at that stack of costs, and then you look at what taking the carbon intensity, CI, of the product from effectively a 0, which is where we'll be at, to like a negative 150, which is what would happen if we were capturing the carbon. And what does that mean in terms of the credit values and everything else? It's a real number. The question is, how feasible is that, number one, and number two, just running math out and figuring out. So those are the two railroad opportunities that I see.
One more question,
Sure.
Another subject, but in the last 5 years, a lot of resources burned up, within the Lakeview area. I don't know what your radius is you're looking at as supply of material. I guess two questions is, have you done a resource study that is current with what's available today? And secondly, is any of that resource, I know has a shortened life, but there's still a lot of dead stuff standing. A lot of it's federal land, but there's also a lot on private land. So what life does it have in your project, or does it have any?
So, answer to your first question, we have done a resource survey. We have had to expand out materially, not significantly, but materially, the radius that Red Rock was looking at in terms of drawing because of the fires. The burnt wood has value. It's, as you can imagine, it's chemically different than what's there, because frankly, you liberated a lot of the energy that was in it when it burned. And so we can process it. It's just a question of, how does the handling there differ from the standard slabs that they're going to be bringing in, and then what is the actual content. There's actually a couple of different studies that are being done right now, not specific to us, but others, in terms of how some of this stuff would actually process. And, we're waiting for some of those results. We can process it. I just don't know exactly what the yield's going to be coming out of it yet.
So the natural gas pipeline that's there, are you going to only use that for transporting out?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Our intention is that we will probably put a second pipe in that right of way, because we could take that pipe and output, but because once we get the thing started, as I mentioned, it's exothermic. We don't need to pull in a lot of gas. However, one of the things that Red Rock made an agreement with the community on, and it's an agreement that we would like to honor, and I think it'd be a great deal, is once we don't really need all that gas coming in, the potential of extending that pipe on into the community so that you've got inbound gas coming in. To do that, we can't have a bidirectional flow, so we're going to have our output pipe separate. We've already talked to Tallgrass Energy about that. The actual tap in the pipeline can support the second pipe coming into it. And so mechanically, it can be done, and that's something that we're looking at doing. That will be a piece of permitting that we'll have to get done, because we'll have to permit the second pipe, but it would be in the right of way.
So my question about the community service earlier, that gas pipe, when it was negotiated, was a 4-inch line.
Yep.
The county negotiated, and they own the capacity to a 6-inch, anything above a 4.
Yep.
So the county, by that community service fee, has the capacity, anything over 4 inches. So that makes me wonder, if you use a transport line, what would that mean to the county and for taxation?
I don't think it would, so I'm not sure I understand your question exactly, but it shouldn't, it's not gonna impact the physical flows. You know, the Ruby runs at north of 600 PSI. I mean, it can move a lot of gas, even through a 4-inch line. And so, you know, I don't know what the potential gas demand of the community would be, but I think it could be satisfied. You know, if you wanted to go to a 6, you go to a 6. You know, it just came out of.
It should be a 6, it's in the ground now.
I think it is a 6.
Anything over 4 inch, the county owns the capacity for that extra site,
Which is
through the negotiation.
I guess my point is that when we're up and running, we're going to have very little natural gas need coming into the facility. You know, now, one of the questions that was asked to me today was, well, hey, if you're making low CI natural gas, why don't, let's not take the NG off the Ruby, let's just take your RNG into the community, and then all of the various customers will get the benefit of the low CI gas. Physically, that's doable. The challenge that I think we're going to have with that is just economics, because with all of those various credits that we were talking about, an actual retail or business customer, if that line were to get extended in the community, what they would end up paying for gas, even if they were trying to buy RNG, would be less than what we're getting paid to put it into the Ruby pipeline. Because once it goes into the Ruby, it goes into the whole interstate system. And so, you know, then you do book and claim on the gas. And so I actually think it's going to work, make sense for everybody, for us to just put it into the Ruby, allow that pipeline to get extended on out on the plant, and then it's just NG. And if people in town want to claim RNG, they can certainly do it. Again, it's the book and claim market, where you say, hey, the going rate for RNG off the mail-in hub, I believe, last Friday was 38 bucks an MMBTU. And if folks want to pay that, then they just book and claim it. You know, you're not getting the physical molecule, but you're doing what's called book and claim. So you're getting the environmental benefit of it.
Red Rock is going to be making kerosene and diesel.
Yep.
Will there be any of that byproduct left over? Can you bring some of that to also offset some of the transportation costs?
No, we're not going to any liquids, because when you go to gas, to take it back down to a liquid, you have to use, this is the old Germany and World War II technology, you have to use the Fischer-Tropsch system to take the gas, string the hydrocarbons back together, gas to liquid GTL, and then you take it through a traditional refining system. So we're not, that's what we're actually doing, that refining process up in Fort West. Yeah, but not here, because once we take it to gas, I don't want it to go back to liquids. I want to maximize the gas main coming out of the facility.
A couple of things. First of all, I want to start by saying thank you for coming here.
Sure, happy to. I love these kind of things. I'd much rather do this than sit in a room full of Goldman Sachs bankers.
It takes a lot of guts to come here and also to sift through all of the misinformation that we experience through Red Rock. So, hats off to you.
Thank you.
Is it methane gas? It's important to clarify, and I'm going to ask you to qualify what I'm about to say.
Sure.
It's true or either false. If you're going after carbon sequestration and you're going after the automotive industry, actually the way that credit works, the automotive companies qualify what they want to pay and how they want to pay for your credit. So you could produce copious amounts of carbon sequestration credits, but if any one of the automotive companies doesn't come in and command price for that, it's zero. And you're sitting in all of them.
That's not correct. So the 45Q credit for the carbon sequestration, and I'm not saying we're going to do carbon sequestration here. There's some technical challenges based on where we are. You know, if you look at some areas in northern Oregon, there's some very interesting sands. You know, it gets really hot when you go down here, so there's not a lot of places you can put carbon. So the 45Q credit is a federal tax credit. It has nobody has to claim it. What you're talking about, which is very active, is the voluntary market, where a lot of these corporates will come in and they'll actually voluntarily agree to take and make certain payments. But whether or not we can take, on carbon sequestration, whether or not we can take a 45Q credit, nobody opines on that. If we're capturing it. Now, one other comment there. The other credit that we will be taking here is not the Q, it's the V. And it's an alphabet soup of various credits, but the 45V credit is the hydrogen credit. And it's actually a direct pay, where you basically tell the EPA, we generated this amount, and they send you a check. It comes straight from the government.
Okay, so that's the part where it wasn't quite clear on. Federal government, what is the actual lag time between the credit and the payout?
Yeah. That's a great question, because I think everybody here would agree that the federal government doesn't do it quick. It is for the tax credit, the 45Q, it is actually a tax credit. And so if you have taxable income, then each year, when you file your tax return, you put the credit on there and you don't have to pay that tax. Okay, so that's the way that one works. To the extent that you don't have any income, you can sell that credit, and there is a market for what's called tax equity. Okay, kind of, that's a little bit about what you were talking about. Somebody needs to claim that credit. Now, if they don't claim it, it's pretty rare that they don't claim it. There's a lot of corporates that will take the tax credits. We've actually been approached by a number of our strategics, large energy companies, et cetera, that are actively looking for those credits. However, we're going to be a net positive. We're going to be a taxpayer, so we would be able to take that credit if we were in the 45Q market. The 45B is different because it is a direct pay. The government just pays, and that's on, they're saying that's going to be on a 90-day rolling. I don't know if I believe that, but it'll come over time. And you can finance against that because that's an offtake to the U.S. government. Yep. Anything else? Yep.
I may have missed the question earlier. We have a concern about workforce and housing in this area.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, on housing, we've had discussions with the town about, some initiatives that they have on workforce, some areas, actually some land they've identified, some stuff that they're working on, which is actually pretty exciting. It's not just related to us, it's related to a lot of the activity that's going on here and the need for housing stock. On workforce, it's going to be a challenge. And that's some stuff, we're facing similar challenges because we're in a rural community up north, and we're working with various groups in the state. We're identifying, kind of centers of excellence, if you will, in some of the community colleges where we can look to help establish programs. But identifying, recruiting, vetting, training, and then bringing on these workers is a huge lift. Again, we face a very similar dynamic up north in Columbia County, and we're working with the same thing. And what it's done is it's forced us to really get to know resources that are available at the state, as well as dig deep with things like in this area KCC and other groups where some programs could get put in place to assist in what we're doing.
What are the workforce skills you're really looking for? I assume you're engineering and stuff, you've gone outside the area by quite a ways.
So you basically got three buckets. You've got your operators, which, this is going to be a little bit flippant, but not really. You're looking for folks who are good at video games. I mean, this is all computer console. I know. Yeah, process control type stuff. Definitely a learning curve in there, training necessary, but it's all the stuff is automated in terms of the operators. So you've got your bucket of operators. You've got your bucket of plant kind of maintenance and control people, that they're focused on the maintenance, they're focused on, making sure that things are moving and pipes are flowing and all of that. And then you've got your material handlers that are out there. And then you've got custodial and the rest of it. But your three main buckets are your operators, your kind of maintenance and controls people, and then your material handling. And so, clearly, I talked about your operators, your maintenance and control people are, electrical skills, mechanical skills, etc. Again, you train up folks to that. You hope that they have a bit of a technical background, coming in, or at least, some, technical work that they have done. And then your operators tend to be, heavy equipment, type folks.
So how do you guys anticipate acquiring your raw material out of the woods? Is that for contracting with local?
Yeah, folks that are already in there getting it out. The companies that we have agreements with are moving material out of the woods. They're moving it, to sawmills, to dimensional lumber plants, etc. And then they're doing as secondary activity. They're collecting a lot of the slash material and shipping it.
Chris, the last outfit talked about 60 to 80 truckloads a day. Is that, do you anticipate that much volume?
We're estimating 40-ish or so. I mean, clearly it depends on bin size, but yeah, I mean, we're thinking about 40 in terms of volume. And then, if you scale up, it could be more. 30 to 40, I think is kind of what we're looking at.
Yeah, I look at the employment issues and housing issues as kind of being not necessarily a negative, because our community, every time we have a community meeting of some kind, we're desperate for a new grocery store. And how you get that is when you bring more people to town that'll shop someplace, and when they have money to shop with. And so there might be kind of a lag time at the beginning of not having enough housing for the workers or enough workers skilled locally, but those people that have to come in from out of town, that's going to be okay, because we need to grow our community a little bit so that we have people working here with money that'll support a Safeway, another store, not Safeway necessarily, but another store, and some other services that we don't have much of locally. That we just need that here. That's part of the benefit of this. It's not just to move this stuff out of the area, the wood waste, but to create employment here that supports this community and the schools and the hospital and all of the other services that we have here. So I look at that as being, there's a problem in getting it all to work together, but when it does, it's net positive for our community.
The challenge is the lag. Is, what does it take, and you need to make sure that there are plans in place, and I think the town has actually got some pretty interesting plans in place, so that you're trying to get it a little bit ahead of that curve. You're never going to be able to sync it up exactly, but you want to be able to quote unquote catch the wave as it's happening, and so people don't get really frustrated. They can't find any housing. You want to have plans in place. So I tell you what, one more question. And then I think we're going to break so that we can give everybody a chance to mingle and kind of ask some of the team individual type stuff. I'm certainly going to be here as long as necessary, all night. And we'll go from there. So
before you take that question, I'm going to give one plug. There's a sign-up sheet over here. So I send out project and company updates all the time. I think all of you would benefit from that information. If you can write your name and your email address, you guys will be well informed. I'll also be coming back to town, but that's the fastest way to get informed on anything that's going on.
Yeah. One of the things, just to build on what Michael said, is we try and make a point, frankly, of over communicating. I would rather ask permission than forgiveness, quite frankly. And so we try and let people know what we're doing. And some of it may just go to your spam folder. But we try and do a very good job of letting folks know that, hey, here's what's happening, here's what's going on, here's an update, etc. And we are accessible. I can't guarantee you if you call me I'm going to answer the phone, because I get a lot of phone calls. But if you leave me a voicemail, I will absolutely get back to you. it's a key point. So
My
sorry.
question is simple. Is during your startup phase and reconditioning and the build-out,
Yep.
what are you anticipating for the size of your labor force at that time?
You know, we're estimating about 500 people. Now, they're not all gonna be on site at once.
Right.
But in terms of the flow through during the process, probably about 500, probably on site at any one time, 100, 150 or so. All right, so I'll come chat with you, we can chat directly, so.
For all of you that just came in, there's food back there on the table. It's done by the high school culinary class, so please help yourself.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. Like I said, we're here, so I'm gonna actually work my way back over here.